Good afternoon. Getting right down to business here. We're doing it live, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons, right after the Guy Benson Show at 3 and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money. We are live on the air in 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple iTunes, YouTube, all of your favorite podcast platforms. And be sure to stay tuned at 6 o'clock this evening for the Just Help One radio show and podcast. I'll be back on with the CEO of the Union Rescue Mission, Mark Hood. Banner day on Wall Street, record-shattering day for stocks and for Bitcoin. Have you heard the news? Well, you will right here. Bitcoin has shot above a record high of $116,000 today. That's right, you heard me. Above 116 for a while. Stocks also hit record highs with the S&P 500 and NASDAQ scoring record highs. This has NVIDIA, the Magnificent One, and the Mag 7 continued on a roll, hitting a record high. NVIDIA shares up $1.22 today to $164 and change. All this amid fresh tariff threats from President Trump. We see Delta Airlines kicking off the earnings season this time around today, moving up more than $6 at $56.78 a share. Yeah, Bitcoin hitting record highs right now, hovering just below $116,000, up about $2,400 at $115,844. We, of course, taking a closer look at all of that. President Trump issuing his most stringent threat yet on the tariff front, threatening Brazil with rates of 50% on its imports. Looks like there's nervous time at Starbucks and other coffee shops with concern that coffee prices will rise if the tariffs do indeed end up being 50%. Markets also focusing on the potential trade deals with the bigger trading partners, including the EU, India, and Canada. The president said a deal with Canada, actually with India, is closed now, and the odds have narrowed after he warned of an extra 10% tariff on BRICS members. That includes Brazil and India. Also, the president sending 22 letters to countries this week. Each has a similar formula dictating the tariff rates he says will apply to their imports starting August 1st. On the economy, we found out jobless claims for the week ending July 5th were 227,000. That was down 5,000 from the previous week, according to the latest reading on unemployment lines. For the first time in 6 weeks, mortgage rates have moved higher. The average 30-year fix now 6.72%. According to the latest survey from mortgage giant Freddie Mac, the 15-year fixed average now 5.82%. That also slightly higher from a week ago. The yield on the 10-year note, by the way, is now 4.35%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates. After failing to close at the level needed to clinch a $4 trillion market cap a day earlier, NVIDIA stock sealed the deal today, finishing the session at an all-time high. NVIDIA beating out Apple and Microsoft for the $4 trillion title. Turning to the Middle East, President Trump's push for a ceasefire in Gaza continues, and we're watching what's happening with Israel. The prime minister saying he's hoping a hostage deal can be finalized in a few days. This after a couple of days of meetings at the White House between President Trump and the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. I'll discuss the latest on the Middle East with Dan RAVIV, former network news correspondent and author of books about the Israeli intelligence service. His latest, Spies Against Armageddon. He also wrote the book Every Spy a Prince about the Israeli intelligence service. The markets have been rallying since President Trump signed the big, beautiful bill into law on the 4th of July. I'll discuss the latest on the tax front this afternoon with Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform, who's also scheduled to be with us live here this afternoon. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, Bitcoin, the whole works now. Joining us live is Jonathan HOENIG, Fox News and Fox Business contributor, portfolio manager at Capitalist Big Hedge Fund, author of the book Price is Primary, How to Profit with Any Asset in Any Market at Any Time. Good afternoon, Jonathan HOENIG.
Frank, it's great to be with you. Another record-setting day, and we've talked about it for a few weeks now. The trend is the market's friend. All-time highs tend to beget more all-time highs. But, I mean, I think probably even you, like I am, are pretty stunned at the ascent of some of these AI names, especially NVIDIA. I mean, this is a stock that's up 67% since just April. And it's not like this is a $2 penny stock. We're talking about literally the biggest company in the history of mankind. It's that $4 trillion market cap. So this has been a stunning rebound for stocks, and probably even more surprising that those very well-known names like AI have been leading, like NVIDIA have been leading the way.
On the air live with Jonathan Hoenig, and NVIDIA blowing past Apple and Microsoft to take that $4 trillion crown. Absolutely remarkable that this AI company, which was pretty much unheard of, about 10 years ago, has taken this kind of crown and has seen another record high today, and the expectation among many analysts that it's going even higher.
Even if you don't own NVIDIA, and particularly, Frank, if you just have a 401k with an index fund in it, it's got, somewhere a 3, 4, 5% allocation to NVIDIA, to these AI-related names. So they really dominate the markets now. I mean, just the same way that, the so-called dot-coms dominated back in the late 90s, it is the AI plays that really dominate the indices. So even if you own the conservative, diversified S&P 500, you got a lot of money riding on AI. But, Frank, we're starting to see more and more of those investments bear fruit. There was a story out this week that Microsoft itself, in fact, has saved somewhere on the order of $500 million thanks to call center employment reductions due to AI. So companies are more and more not just, this isn't just a kind of talk anymore. Companies are using this technology to better their bottom lines, and that's improving shareholder returns.
All right, and as we've seen, things in the AI world can go cattywampus pretty easily with this Grok controversy this week. Unbelievable what happened there on X. Grok is part of Elon Musk's empire. What about how AI is evolving with some really disgraceful examples that we've seen recently?
Well, look, it's certainly not perfect, and it's a rocky road. And innovation, I think, is always like that. I remember a time, Frank, you might as well, when people were very afraid to buy things online because there was a sense of, gee, I can't put my credit card number on the internet. What would happen? What could happen? So there's certainly a learning curve, and I know that Elon Musk and others in this space are working hard to fix those algorithms, improve the algorithms, but look, we're going to see AI challenge Google's dominance in search in the coming weeks and the coming months, and that's something that previously had been seen as an unheard of moat that could never be challenged. So it truly is changing the economy, and will continue to do so. But when it comes to your portfolio, Frank, I have to say I think there's opportunities in places besides AI. I still like a lot, for example, of those emerging markets. They're still trading at very cheap discounts relative to U.S. stocks. Same thing with small capitalization stocks. So I think you want to be in the market, but don't just look at those few familiar names that have led for so long.
On the live with Jonathan Hoenig, and the earnings season kicking off today. Jonathan Hoenig, let's talk about that for a moment, with Delta Airlines taking the spotlight. That stock taking off today, up more than 6 at 56 and change to something we haven't talked about much, the airlines and Delta taking the spotlight today.
No, they always seem to be boom or bust types of trades. I mean, I remember the so-called JETS ETF, Frank, ticker symbol is JETS. It has actually a basket of all the airlines, and you can imagine it collapsed in the wake of COVID, had a huge comeback, and it's had a lot of volatility since then. So, I don't think you bet against Delta right here or airlines writ large, but they just don't see, to me, to be the real emerging new bull markets. I think it's going to be a market performer, but good news and good earnings just gives a better sense of optimism to all who trade and invest on Wall Street.
All right, we talked to the biggest fans of crypto as well as the harshest critics, but it looks like those critics are slipping away now as Bitcoin has soared above 116,000 today, a record high. Bitcoin right now, last check here, just below 116. Did you ever think we'd see this level? And what's your reaction to the big news, Bitcoin hitting record highs today?
Well, I have to tell you, Frank, late in the day today, I tried to sell short a few shares of MicroStrategy unsuccessfully. The market handed me a pretty quick loss as that company, very tied to Bitcoin and crypto, soared higher. And look, all-time highs beget more all-time highs. So, I've been, I don't want to say a critic, but I've certainly been a skeptic of Bitcoin, and I've been proven completely wrong. So, the fact that it's at 116, there's a good indication that 120 or even 125 could be in the offing. I just think, like any investment, Frank, don't make it an all or none decision. If you want to think about 5%, 10% of your portfolio, with a good stop loss order. But where people get themselves into trouble, it doesn't matter whether it's technology stocks or Bitcoin or Beanie Babies, is when they make it.
Mic Drop, hosted by former Navy SEAL Mike Ritlin. It's raw.
Any single time that you left the wire, you could lose 4 guys.
It's unfiltered.
That's the most horrible screaming I'd ever heard. Taking a hit on the chin, you want to pay it back?
It's tough talk from the top minds in their field.
Would I choose to not do our duty as military fighting men? No, I would not make that decision, without question.
Mic Drop. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
An all or none, and especially when they do it on leverage. So, I think you can take a risk, but I also think, Frank, some of the most interesting stocks right now are some of the least risky. For example, PSF, that's Peter FF as in Frank. This is an ETF that has a basket of preferred stocks yielding over 6.5%, 7%, with some room for price appreciation if yields come down. So they've been out of favor for quite some time, and they're coming back. Just one example of how I do think you want to be truly diversified, not just buy those same old names.
All right, so certainly the digital gold was in focus today, but analog gold and the other metals have seen a tremendous run up, with platinum especially shining above 1,400 again today here. Gold hovering at around 33 or so, and after hitting a record high a few months ago, above 3,500. Silver getting close to $40 an ounce. What about the metals here?
Rising tide lifting all boats, and we've talked about platinum on your program, Frank, for numbers of months now, and I still think that's a buy. The ticker symbol is PPLT. I own this one over at capitalispig.com, and you want to have a long-term perspective. You can't just look for a 1 day or even 1 month. But my God, what a hell of a month it's been for platinum. You've seen about a 30% rise, yet it's still a good 1/3 below its all-time high price that reached back in 2008. So I think this is one area, Frank, that's suggesting that inflation isn't dead, and I like all the metals here. Copper, just earlier this week, or I should say late last week, copper hit an all-time high. Now, that happened even before the president instituted those new copper tariffs. So I think the wind is at the back of metals. Gold, silver, platinum, and palladium, I think, deserve to be part of a portfolio, and we are steering clients toward it over at capitalispig.com.
Interesting what's happening with copper, which has been said that copper is the only metal that has a degree in economics. It's also an indicator of the economy. When copper goes up, usually the economy is strong because it's used in so many things. And now it costs more than a penny to make a penny, and the decision was made this year to discontinue pennies, right? So a lot of interesting things happening that revolve around copper.
And I'll give you one more to put on that list, Frank. A very unusual, under-the-radar screen ETF. It's T as in Timothy, MET, TMET, and that is a basket of some of those rare metals and like palladium, platinum, rhodium, aluminum, zinc, that basically are very economically sensitive and otherwise hard to get exposure to. So, again, don't make it an all or none, but as part of a portfolio, TMET, especially, Frank, I look at so many portfolios and people own Apple, NVIDIA, and the S&P 500, or Apple, NVIDIA, and the triple Qs. That's great, but I don't think that's truly diversified. Things like GLD or TMET, I think that can really help round out and truly diversify a portfolio.
On the air live with Jonathan Hoenig, covering everything from A to Zinc here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC here this afternoon. And the dust now settling following the president signing of the big, beautiful bill, which we'll be talking more about with Grover Norquist coming up later on this program. But what are some of the opportunities you see coming out of this lifting of the uncertainty here now that we have this bill finally signed?
I think you'll likely see the continued outperformance of non-U.S. stocks. And that was really one of the big themes in the first half of the year, Frank. I mean, the average non-U.S. stock went up on the order of 2 to 3 times what the U.S. did. So, I'm looking towards, especially, as I said, a lot of the emerging markets, Asia, I like quite a bit, and the Middle East. I think Israel is really bestowed upon the world what will be known in hindsight as a real peace dividend by destroying Iran's nuclear capacity, Frank. We're seeing a lot of these markets in the Middle East, like UAE, that's the ticker symbol for the United Arab Emirates ETF. That's breaking out to new highs. Same thing with KWT. I own both of those. And EIS, that's the ETF that tracks the Israeli market. I think those are all buys right now, and that whole sector, that whole region is really ripe for great opportunity. Just as, after World War II, there was, picking up some the dust and the pieces of the defeated enemy. I think if we can really make some great political strides in the Middle East, you'll see economic strides as well.
That's very interesting. And, of course, there's things in that bill that get people away from some of the green policies we've seen in recent years. What about on renewables, EVs, and so forth?
Well, I mean, it's not the same old game. I mean, the renewable energy ETFs are pretty weak. The EV credits are evaporating. That's make investing in companies like Tesla or Rivian less and less attractive. But Frank, whenever you invest based on government subsidies or government favors, I mean, you always run the risk that those favors ultimately evaporate. I mean, it almost makes me think of something like the people who lost money buying taxi medallions over the years because along came Uber and destroyed that taxi cab medallion monopoly. So I don't see so-called green energy being a great place to put money right now, with the exception of one stock, and that is Brookfield Renewable, BEPC. I do own this one over at capitalspig.com, and this is basically a utility play. BEPC, Brookfield Renewable, especially if you're looking for income, that's one I would put on your list.
Now you're live with Jonathan Hoenig. Any other specific places, Jonathan Hoenig, where you are putting money now and or taking it off the table?
We mentioned platinum and preferred shares at PFF. I'll give you one more, Frank, that I still think is a really unusual idea now. The ticker symbol is ILS. And this is a bond fund, so this is an income fund, but it's not tied to any particular interest rate. It's actually tied to climate catastrophes. This is a catastrophe bond ETF. So basically, if there's not a lot of hurricanes next year, this fund could pay off anywhere on the order of 15 to 18%. Now, if there are a lot of hurricanes, if there's a lot of catastrophe bond claims, this fund will underperform. But as one element that's truly going to be diversified from the markets, look to the skies, look to the weather, and consider ILS as part of that income portfolio.
All right, at this point, Jonathan Hoenig, does this thing have more to go here? The Dow just below its all-time high. What about 400 points below the all-time high for the Dow? The S&P 500 and NASDAQ today at record highs. What's your outlook for the overall market here now?
Highs beget more highs. I mean, what's going to happen, Frank, is that when the market does correct, I think you're going to get a lot of people who are going to come in and say, gee, now I'll buy it. I like to buy. Most people feel much more comfortable buying the dips. Well, you should feel more comfortable buying the strength. So, as long as that market's nipping new all-time highs, it's telling you something, and it wants higher. But most people lose money not because they buy a market at an all-time high. They wait for it to go down, and then they say, oh, well, I didn't like it at 50. I like it at 40. Oh, now it's at 30 and then 20. And people feel more comfortable buying on the way down. So I don't. I mean, if you're a bull, I think be a bull. And as long as the market keeps hitting new highs, there's just no objective evidence that trend is set to turn. But that's why, Frank, I still think you want to focus on things like value, things like small cap and international, because unlike big cap tech, unlike those mag stocks, as you said, the AI plays, they're simply not expensive. Their valuations are not stretched, and they could ride out, I think, an economic period of economic uncertainty or recession when it does and ultimately come.
Terrific. Jonathan Hoenig, thank you very much for joining us. And also want to bring the folks' attention to your great book, Price is Primary, How to Profit with Any Asset in Any Market at Any Time. It's always great to have you with us here. Jonathan Hoenig, Fox News and Fox Business contributor, portfolio manager at Capitalist Pig Hedge Fund, and the book, once again, Price is Primary. Jonathan Hoenig, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
My pleasure. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you very much. A lot of people popping the champagne. We'll take a closer look at today's action on Wall Street in just a moment. But right now, the latest on your ride this afternoon here on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues, 790 KBC. Good afternoon. Big day for Bitcoin, popping above 116,000 for the first time. Yep, you heard me. Above 116,000 right now, just below that here, up about 2,400. Let's take a look here, up 2,441 to 115,857 at last check. Ethereum up about 128 now at 2,948. That's seen an impressive rebound this year. Solana back up to around 163, and Doge has moved higher as well this week at 19 cents. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of 192 points, settling at 44,650, getting close to its all-time high, which is just above 45,000. The S&P 500 at a record high today, record high close of 17 points to 6,280, and the NASDAQ continues to pop at a record high close today up 19 at 20,631. The yield in the 10-year note at 4.35%. We have seen fixed-rate mortgage rates tied to that yield in the 10-year note tick higher this week for the first time in weeks. The volatility index pulling back 1% today. Gold on a roll at more than $9 at $3,334 and change. Silver getting close to $40 an ounce, up nearly 50 cents today to 37 and change. And platinum back above $1,400 at $1,414 an ounce, up $1.50 here at the moment. Taking a look at Delta Airlines coming out with earnings, and the stock moved higher at more than $6 at 56 and change. NVIDIA, the Magnificent One, leading the charge higher today. The AI giant moving up $1.22 to a record high close of $164.10. Tesla rebounding today, up nearly $14 at $309.87. And now the latest news in 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KABC. What's next? Now that the big, beautiful bill is the law of the land, let's bring in the leading taxpayer advocate in America, and that is Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover Norquist, thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
Absolutely. Good to be with you. And it is law of the land, and most of it is permanent, not the kind of tax cuts that last 4 years and disappear or 2 years and disappear. This is out into infinity.
All right. What is next? I see already calls. Let's do it again. More tax cuts. What's on the plate now?
Well, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has been saying for some time publicly and has reiterated it, that there will be two more reconciliation packages, just like this one. I mean, they won't be the same size. This one had all sorts of things in it, but the same rules, which is you can add or subtract spending amounts. You could add or subtract taxes. So you can't change laws because laws could be filibustered. But in this case, when you could decide to reduce more spending to reform entitlements again, you could decide to sell off government property. You could decide to reduce taxes. And we're going to have two more, one in November, one in the spring. And I think there's an article in today's Washington Post where I and others point out that the next obvious thing to do is to protect Americans against the Biden inflation and to say that all capital gains taxes will take the inflation out. So if your house has become worth $300,000 more than it once did, when you sell it, you would have to pay taxes on $300,000 of gain. But if 1/3 of that, $100,000, was actually inflation, you would only pay taxes on 2/3 of it, on the part that was real. So this would end the taxation on the Biden inflation and on all inflation from when you bought your house to when you sold it, or if you have shares of stock, or if you started a small business. It would dramatically reduce people's taxes when they sell an asset such as their house.
On the air live with Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform. You've had a tremendous influence on tax policy since you worked with President Reagan back in the 1980s. What would you like to see happen at this point, and what kind of guidance are you giving the lawmakers there in Washington now?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that would make sense. We could take the corporate rate, which is 21, which is competitive with much of Europe. Take it to 15, which would make us much more competitive with China and much more competitive with Europe. China has a 15% rate. We need to get down to that level as well. And we can, quote unquote, pay for that by reducing the state and local tax deductibility for corporate income. So this could be sort of a revenue neutral change, but it would certainly create very strong incentives to bring more capital into the United States. We had trillions of dollars of capital came into the United States when we took the corporate rate from 25 to 21. We would see something like that when we went from 21 down to 15. I think indexing capital gains for inflation, there's no reason people should pay taxes on inflation. You don't pay taxes on inflation on your personal income tax. Reagan adjusted that so that the brackets would move up. And just because the government printed more money, this is when Jimmy Carter was busy printing money and having inflation, kind of like
the United States Soccer Federation presents the U.S. Soccer Podcast.
The United States have the lead.
The United States in full command.
To the back post, settled, scores! Centering, doubling his tally.
Never miss a game.
Hooks it across, into the middle, and there's the opening goal. Two for the United States.
Never miss a moment.
Barreling in, cutting in, going for goal, deflected and in. Yeah!
The U.S. Soccer Podcast. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
An awful lot like what Biden did. We said we're not going to tolerate that anymore, and we will have the brackets move up so that you don't get moved into a higher tax bracket because you have more income, meaning that they've inflated the currency, and it looks like you have more income. You just same income, it's just more dollars because the dollar isn't worth what it once was worth. So not ending the tax on inflation, protecting people from the Biden inflation attack on the value of their money, their income, and so on. I think that's very important. And we do need to take the corporate income tax down because we want to compete in the world with lower taxes than China has, not lower wages.
Big difference from what was on the agenda for the other side. Certainly, can we all breathe a sigh of relief here? We dodged the biggest tax increase in history with all this. Is the champagne still flowing there?
It is. Had the Democrats won, had they stopped the big, beautiful bill from passing either by, remember, it only passed by one vote in the Senate, only passed by 2 or 3 votes in the House. The Republican majority is very narrow. And had that failed, had the Democrats been able to kill the bill, everybody who pays income taxes in America would see their tax rates go up, whether you make a lot of money, a little money, middle-sized money, small businesses would all see their tax rates go up. Your per-child tax credit would be cut in half. The standard deduction would be cut in half. So you would be paying taxes sooner on income rather than later. Less of your income would be shielded from taxes, and particularly also with the child tax credit that you have now for each child, that would be not $2,000 plus, but $1,000 instead. So it was about a $4 billion tax, $4 trillion tax increase on the American people over a decade. More than that, out years 11, 12, 13, but $4 trillion over the next 10 years. Now we have permanent protection of the lower rates. And when businesses invest to make workers more productive, they can expense that, which makes it less expensive, which means they're more likely to buy bigger trucks, bigger tractors, bigger machines, better computers, all the things that make workers more productive and higher paid.
On your live with Grover Norquist, and then the other significant thing here for Californians, the increase in the SALT deductions, state and local tax deductions going up from 10 to 40,000. Tell us about the expected impact of that here in California, which we were blessed to have you visit us here in Los Angeles recently at a great appearance at the Los Angeles Taxpayers Association. And now that the dust has settled here, what do you see as the impact of this big SALT deduction increase?
Well, it will reduce taxes for people in California who have expensive houses, higher incomes, and pay high rates, which is a lot of people in California. And that will reduce the cost. Indexing, the bigger, though, for both California and New York, will be indexing capital gains for inflation so that when you do sell your house after, if you've been in the house for 30 years, 60% of the increase in the value of your home is inflation. So it is a dramatic reduction in the tax you would pay, capital gains tax, when you sell your house, either to move or to because you're an empty nester and you don't need the big house. You can sell it to somebody who has a larger family, and you can move to a house or that's more suitable to your needs. It will free up the housing market, and many people will be able to. You don't want to sell your house when you've got to pay taxes on Biden's inflation. You keep hoping that's going to go away, but the only way to do that is by executive order. Trump can do this by executive order and say the cost basis for capital gains will be what you paid for it plus inflation, to take the inflation off the table. No one should be paying the Biden inflation tax.
Grover, thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon as the 4th of July fireworks continue on Wall Street following the signing of the big, beautiful bill into law by the president on the 4th of July. That is Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, again, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon. Live with us here on 790 KBC. Frank Mottek here for United Gold Group. Did you know that for more than 10,000 years, gold has been the greatest store of value and considered a safe haven asset to preserve your wealth? Well, now the U.S. debt at more than $36 trillion and climbing, a possible recession on the horizon, and the development of the digital dollar, central bank digital currency, it's more critical now than ever before to safeguard your assets like your cash savings and retirement accounts with physical gold. Opening a gold IRA is one of the best ways to secure your wealth and create a stable financial future. Stop worrying about your retirement and the markets and cash savings in the bank. Feel confident, prepared, and in control with physical gold and, yes, silver. Give my friends at United Gold Group a call. That number is 800-753-8534. Mention Mottek, and you can get $1,000 worth of silver with a qualifying purchase. Call now, 800-753-8534. Again, that's 800-753-8534. Or visit UnitedGoldGroup.com. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KABC. Stock market in rally mode with the S&P 500 and NASDAQ at record highs. The Dow just below its all-time high. President Trump pushing for a ceasefire in Gaza now. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visiting with the president this week in Washington. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, says he's hoping a hostage deal can be finalized in a few days as the war between Israel and Hamas continues following the terror attack on Israel back on October 7th, 2023. The Prime Minister of Israel says he'll agree to start talks on a permanent ceasefire once a 60-day truce commences. Hamas tells mediators it will not accept updated Israeli maps of IDF partial Gaza withdrawal. That's the latest headline coming across the wires now. Let's bring in Middle East expert Dan RAVIV, former network news correspondent, author of books about the Israeli intelligence service. His latest, Spies Against Armageddon, Inside Israel's Secret Wars. Also author of Every Spy or Prince. Also an excellent podcast, The Mossad Files. Dan RAVIV, thank you very much for joining us here live this afternoon.
Frank, it's a pleasure, and as usual, you're on top of the headlines. Keep in mind, by the way, that Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has been here where I am in Washington, D.C. all this week. There were high expectations that we might have an end to the Gaza war, which began in October of 2023. But so far, the Israelis and Hamas, the extremists who run Gaza, still seem far apart on some key elements. And so I think it's been, frustrating for President Trump. I think there are signs of that.
Is Israel still under attack by Hamas rockets or Houthis or any other any other enemies of Israel surrounding Israel?
Yeah, perfect question. Nothing coming in from Iran or Iran's allies in Lebanon, Hezbollah. They seem, at least for now, to have been defeated by the Israelis. But the Houthis in far-off Yemen, more than 1,000 miles down south, down the Red Sea, the Houthis in Yemen just won't quit attacking Israel from a great distance using long-range missiles, usually only one at a time, and the Israelis shoot them down. They hardly ever cause damage, but a lot of inconvenience and terror to the Israelis. And you know, Frank, that early this week, the Israeli Air Force targeted 3 ports in Iran and even sank a ship that the Houthis had stolen out on the Red Sea. But nothing seems to make the Houthis quit, so that's been annoying. And Hamas in Gaza, just to show they're still alive, not only lobbed a few missiles at southern Israel, and in general they were shot down by the Iron Dome system, but there have been some ambushes in Gaza, and I count at least 8 Israeli soldiers who were killed. But let's not forget the Israeli bombing has continued, and hundreds of Gaza residents were killed this week. The Israelis say they killed a lot of terrorists, and of course the UN and other health officials say that a lot of civilians died. So the Gaza war is still unsettled and very dangerous.
It appears Iran continues to support those who continue to attack Israel, right? And what about the ceasefire now between Israel and Iran? Will it hold?
Yeah, and that's something that President Trump declared, right? Keep in mind that Israel decided to attack Iran's nuclear sites on June 13th. 9 days later, President Trump joined in, right? He had the B-2 bombers flying from the United States, hitting 3 nuclear facilities, including Fordo Mountain, where the Iranians have nuclear labs, or had nuclear labs, buried deep inside. We think that the huge bunker buster bombs caused great damage, but there's some disagreement as to whether the Iranians somehow have kept some highly enriched uranium and might return to their nuclear work. So again, some question marks there, though President Trump says that the nuclear program of Iran was obliterated. What the Israelis say is they're continuing to watch it, and if the Iranians dare to get back to their nuclear program, then Israel would be prepared to bomb those facilities again.
What's the outlook for the current leadership in Iran and for a more comprehensive peace deal throughout the Middle East?
Yeah, really big crackdowns inside Iran. I think it seems that the Ayatollah's regime is continuing by oppressing the people. Any sign of protest or rebellion is being quashed. So I think the regime is going to survive. I think it was, well, humiliated by the effectiveness of the Israeli and U.S. attacks on the nuclear program. But otherwise, Iran is continuing to be what it is, and also an enemy of the U.S. We get rumors every day that Steve Witkoff, President Trump's special envoy, will have a meeting with the Iranians, maybe to reach some kind of new nuclear deal, but that hasn't happened. Now, more broadly, what about the Arab countries like Saudi Arabia? Will they perhaps have normal relations with Israel, joining the Abraham Accords? I would have to tell you this, Frank, not as long as the Gaza war continues. So the first step, if there could be a deal, would be a ceasefire for 60 days, Israeli hostages being released, but maybe not all of them, and some Palestinian prisoners released by Israel. What will happen in those 60 days if there's a deal for a ceasefire? Again, we don't know. So I would say the Middle East is on edge.
And in the meantime, we see this glaring headline here. Prime Minister Netanyahu says hoping a hostage deal can be finalized in a few days. So let's see what happens here, and we'll keep an open line to you. Excellent reporting, as always, Dan RAVIV. We appreciate it, and we'll be tuning into your excellent podcast, The Mossad Files, as well. That is Middle East expert Dan RAVIV, former network news correspondent, author of books about the Israeli intelligence service. His latest, Spies Against Armageddon. Dan RAVIV, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank.
Coming up next, stay tuned for the 790 KBC News Blitz. And then at 6, stay tuned for the Just Help One radio show and podcast presented by the Union Rescue Mission. I'll be back on with Union Rescue Mission CEO Mark Hood, and we'll continue at 6 p.m. right here on the Just Help One radio show and podcast and 790 KBC.
Nightly Scroll with Haley Caronia.
Hello to all my homies in the chat. I'm Haley Caronia with some very inconvenient truths.
Your go-to place for the hottest button issues.
Don't you hate when facts get in the way of a good news story?
Cut through the noise and get ready to scroll through the chaos of the modern world, one hot take at a time.
Hear me out. We might need to spread this information 24/7. Let's get into some scrolling time.
Nightly Scroll with Haley Caronia.
I love this place.
Follow and listen on your favorite platform.